YouTube, Dawson Ryder here. Welcome to my video where I'm going to be discussing the Power Rangers franchise, as per usual. First of all, before we get started, does anyone want to get out? Because this lighting is weird. You might notice the lighting is a little bit weird. I'm clearly filming more at night, and I'm experimenting with some different lights and some lighting. I put on this orangish light. So obviously this isn't a perfect setup. I know lots of other YouTubers make it seem super fancy and cozy, and I just look like a deer caught in the headlights. Literally just a circular light that makes it look like I'm about to go into a portal. Just let me know in the comments if you don't mind this type of lighting, if I tweak it and make it better in the future, try to make it more of a nice mood lighting, but also that I'm able to more so easily record at night. Because the previous lights I had was kind of hard to work with recording at night, and they broke. So just let me know in the comments. But you're not here for that lighting discussion. This video isn't called Power Rangers Franchise Future and Lighting. The reason for making this video is obviously right now we're in a very uncertain time for the Power Rangers franchise. We're on effectively a perpetual hiatus, an indefinite hiatus. You know, outside of non-Hasbro merchandise coming out and the comic, there is no new content that we know of on the horizon. The toys are on pause. The reboot is in development supposedly, but who knows when we'll see that. Some people think we'll never see it. And, you know, a lot of fans aren't happy and they think Hasbro mishandled it and it would be better elsewhere. But where else? Honestly, for this video, I couldn't think of any, what-if scenarios of, if this company owned Power Rangers that didn't already own it. I'm primarily going to be discussing, comparing and contrasting the positives and negatives that could happen with the previous owners still owning PR. Meaning, what would happen if Disney owned it? What would happen if Saban had kept it type of stuff? Maybe that's a discussion for a different time, but I couldn't think off the top of my head any good examples of, companies that have never been involved with PR owning it and what could have happened there. Let's talk about, with Hasbro, it seemed clear that they had ambition. I think that their core idea was, a lot of people say they don't know what they're doing or what they want. I think at the core, they know what they want. They've just had a hard time getting to the approach. I think that there's probably been several different meetings and discussions where they've kind of landed on a general idea where they want to go, and then for one reason or another it's changed. Because as we know, I think there's been multiple direction changes, there's been leadership changes, there's been stuff like the pandemic, which I think shied them away from the theatrical release of the movie, because I think they were already gun shy about it because Power Rangers had a hard time taking off at the movies already. Add in, the fact that the whole situation changed. So, I don't think that they have an entire lack of idea of what they want. I just think they don't know how to do the approach. I think what they mainly want, again, I can't say for certain, but based on the way they've behaved and statements they've made, I think when they bought the franchise, they had the idea that they could take the concept and make it their own. They reboot it, have an original idea, or something maybe tethered to mmpr, but you know what I mean, their own original suits, footage, universe that's not tied to Sentai or they have to do all that stuff. I think that was the idea, that they saw the potential in the concept of making their own world and splintering out from there, probably still taking advantage of, the marketability of MMPR, but I think that's the core idea. I think they did know what they want, they just have not been able to agree on how to get there. Thinking about, first of all, in terms of other companies' potential with Disney, Disney is interesting because Disney gets kind of painted with the same brush of Hasbro as, they don't care. They don't care. They want it to die. They don't care, I think, is presented as, when fans say that Hasbro doesn't care or Disney didn't care, I think what they're saying in their heads is actually, or thinking, is that they don't care means they hate it and they want it to die. They don't care doesn't mean that. I think Disney didn't care in the sense that they didn't care about building Power Rangers into a huge brand. I think they were convinced and shown, hey, if you basically keep it going on this autopilot, you can turn a small profit. And they're like, fine. And so that's fine. And the thing is, there was people that worked on the show that cared. So Disney didn't care about it in the sense that they didn't care about it being anything more than it was. I think that fans have this expectation that everybody that's working on the brand, from the corporate level to the assistant getting the coffee, has to care about it as much as the fans, and that's just unrealistic. Disney didn't care about making it bigger, and that's why. And I don't think now, if they still had it, I'm kind of curious. I'm of two minds on it if they still had it or how it would have gone. Because as we know, it aired on Jetix and it had a pretty substantial presence. It was most of the Jetix network. I think PR had just a really good state of existence during that era. It was very consistent, it never tried to do any huge events or anything bigger, but you always accepted the same level of performance in terms of the show and the toys and all that stuff during that era. And then it came to an end because Jetix became Disney XD. And if I remember right, I don't know all the behind the scenes details, but if I remember right, the reason RPM was slightly retooled to be a little bit more mature even than what was going on was that they wanted to pair it up with Aaron Stone and be part of Disney XD, and then for whatever reason they changed their minds, and that's why it was shuffled off to ABC Family at 4 in the morning, And I don't know why they did that. Like, they still did Aaron Stone. Disney XD largely, I think the idea was originally was going to be the boys Disney Channel, if I remember, but it's largely morphed into a network that airs Gravity Falls reruns. So it's honestly more become like the animated network, where like most of the live action shows are on Disney Channel proper. I haven't followed Disney Channel proper since like, I think the last time I ever watched it was like the Wizards of Waverly Place days, but you know what I mean? Anyway, long time ago. I'm really curious to see what the timeline looks like where they just try to do RPM and Aaron Stone, and like if that would have worked. Because I don't know all the numbers or anything, but I think PR was stable and established enough at the time that it would have been something familiar for the transition, and I think that there's a future where it could have done well. Where it's interesting to think about like where it would have gone is we're in the new streaming era and stuff, and Disney obviously owns real deal brands like Star Wars and Marvel, so it's like, who cares about Power Rangers when you have Star Wars and Marvel? They also have a ton of different like brands like all over Disney, so it's like when I think about what would have happened if Disney would have kept it, I think that I'm of two minds. One, I feel like just the most realistic thing is eventually they just would have gotten rid of it or let it gone dormant because they have bigger fish to fry. But also, I see a ton of like random shows and brands on Disney Plus that are like, you know, shows that I've never heard of, whether it's when I'm browsing it or like I'll see news like, oh, the Duck Duck Heroes just got renewed for season 3, and it's like, so I could have seen Power Rangers still existing like that. Honestly, I could totally see, you know, if all the stars aligned, a future where effectively I don't think we would have ever gotten a situation where they tried to reboot it or make it anything big, but it would have just kind of continued existing on a certain level. Like, I think, again, they would have done the Disney XD thing, and it would have just existed on there, and like the way it was effectively for however many years, and we would have still gotten seasons of a certain quality with the toys, and then eventually I think it would have maybe tried to jump to Disney Plus as one of those shows that just kind of airs, that's kind of just viewed by its fan base and its fan base alone, more or less, for X amount of time. Again, I can't say for sure, but I definitely think it's interesting seeing what Disney has become. Not in like, oh my god, they're trying to kill all the fans, or whatever they say, you know, woke, but I just mean like, the landscape has completely changed with them owning stuff like Star Wars and Marvel. Primarily, I think it's interesting to think about Neo Saban in terms of their ambition. There's a lot of criticism and a lot of weird decisions with Neo Saban, and the Prime show is not at its best. But I think they had a lot of ambition for the brand, oddly enough, and there is kind of an interesting similarity to Hasbro and Saban's Neo Saban, or Saban brands rather, their ambition. And they also are kind of inverses of each other. Like, Hasbro's ambition, I think, was to make their own thing totally. Like, that be the main thing. They wanted whatever their reboot is to be the main thing. And again, I'm sure that they would have still wanted to take advantage of MMPR's popularity in some form or another to turn a profit, you know, with the comics or merchandise or what have you. And I think Neo Saban's ambition, I keep calling it Neo Saban, I hate that. Saban brand's ambition, I think, was to keep the main show going for as long as possible, as it was, as we saw it, but then also have the reboot, which was the 2017 movie, and have that be successful. And on paper, that sounds great, because that's kind of the best of both worlds, Hannah Montana style, speaking of the Disney Channel, of kind of what people want. Because right now, a lot of the anxiety, obviously, we don't have anything happening right now, so that causes a lot of anxiety. But a lot of the anxiety around the reboot is there's so many people that are like, their minds remain firmly closed, and they just want the main show as it's been for 30 years, and they never want it to change and just stay in purgatory forever. So Neo Saban's idea on paper is kind of the best of both worlds, is where you get the show in purgatory forever, and then we get a reboot that's a new take that goes to a wider audience, so you kind of please everyone to a degree. Obviously, that didn't work out because the movie didn't end up performing as well as they thought, and they just wound up selling it off. I'm really curious, like, what it would have been like if they would have kept it and held on. Would they have just kind of kept the show in purgatory for as long as possible? Would they ever have attempted anything more? What would it have looked like if they had been successful? I can't say for sure, like, what might have happened, because I'm really curious, like, would they have even tried to press it and keep the 2017 movie going? I guess I could kind of say, like, what I'd like to happen is I would have loved to see them maybe try to press it and get a sequel going and see if they can make some improvements on some of the things that people were upset about, like maybe a little bit more action and stuff. The main thing about that is the show, though, like I said, it wasn't that great. Where you had like all these weird mandates from Saban we learned about later about certain things of like, you can't have a lot of plot, you gotta focus on filler, you gotta have fart jokes, and it's like, that's the thing that gets me, is like, even if we're looking at this positive future of maybe trying to continue the reboot world with the main show, is like, how long would that have lasted? Would that have lasted forever? Why is that a thing? Like, again, it'd be a different story if like Power Rangers had gotten canceled like in space, like it was supposed to or whatever. And Saban had this idea that like, oh, as soon as we became more serious, the show stopped working, and then that's why he went back to MMPR. But it existed longer in the maturity level of In Space through RPM than it did as MMPR. I know that it didn't take off the same way, but it's not as if it was canceled because it aged out of being like almost preschool like. So I don't know. That's what would have been interesting to me is like in this timeline, let's say both things were to continue. Would the show have continued like that forever, or would it have eventually been able to make something of a change? Because it didn't even seem like changing showrunners was able to help that much because you had this overall like Saban overseeing it thing. The thing is if I lay down Neo Saban's ideas and Hasbro's ideas on paper, again, I know I've said that a bunch of times, but I like them both. I'm honestly would have been happy with both theoretically. I'm totally on board with no more Sentai, freeing us from the shackles of Sentai, doing a universe where we're creatively free, see creatively new ideas, I'm ready for a change. But with Saban Brands, if their plans would have worked out, I'm totally fine too, where you get to see the 2017 movie universe continue, and that being an avenue for new ideas and new sequels and who knows what else. But also keeping the main show for the people that really want that, and also, you know, I still enjoyed it to a degree, and it's always nice to have that comfort. So, you know, theoretically, both are fine. It's just the matter of either execution isn't going so well. I mean, obviously, Neo Saban's didn't go so well. I would be curious to see what that would have looked like if that would have been successful, because I really do believe that if you change certain circumstances around the 2017 movie, I think that they did, you know, really try to make it happen, but I think they could have done better. I think they could have given it a different time. Like, I think that it opened up against, like, Beauty and the Beast or something. I think that if there's just been a set of different circumstances around the movie, I think it could have done well enough to at least get a sequel to give it a second chance, because a lot of people feel like they say the 2017 movie failed basically because they didn't like it. That's the consensus I see. Because, again, I can't say I polled everybody, but from what I see online when I see casuals talking about it that saw it, and obviously not as many people saw it as you'd want for it to be successful, but almost everybody I've seen talk about it either online or in person that was like a casual fan, like that either just saw it because it was a movie and they'd heard Power Rangers, or they watched it when they were younger and that was it, liked it, and thought it at least had potential. You know, so I think that if more people had seen it, I think maybe even if they had some of the same complaints about there not being enough action, that they would have liked it enough to give it a chance for a sequel. And they could have improved on that because now that they set the base with that, there probably would have been more action in the sequel. But I see a lot of people basically saying like, well, I didn't like it because it didn't have enough tokusatsu action, so that's obviously why it did bad. I think that the 2017 movie could have worked. I think that it's fans simplify it effectively as well. I didn't like what they did, so that's why it didn't do well, clearly. And I think it was more like just a bunch of different circumstances. But I think that if there'd just been a few things tweaked, I think it could have done well enough to at least possibly get a sequel. And I think I remember even hearing that Hasbro had interest in continuing that universe, but there was like some red tape involved, like with licensing or whatever. I'd be really curious to see what that timeline looked like. And I think that what's frustrating about it is we were like so close. Like, again, if a few things would have just gone differently, then the 2017 universe would have maybe continued and we could have spawned more movies, maybe even other spin-offs, and then we could have continued the main show and that. The problem is the main show wasn't that great either. You know, to be fair, there's definitely a generation of fans that grew up with those shows, that love Samurai, that love Dino Charge, so on and so forth. But I definitely think there was a de-evolution there that didn't need to happen. I never understood the way of thinking, which effectively seemed to boil down to like, well, this was a hit in 1993 when we did this, so let's just do it again. So, again, I think hypothetically it seems like the grass is greener back on the other side when you think about that. If you, like, people always say, like, I wish Saban just would have kept it, or it was so much better back then because, you know, we still had the main show, but it's like the show wasn't that great. Like, again, so it's like, same thing with the toys. Like, people will romanticize stuff. To be fair, I do miss Bandai. Not in the sense that I think Hasbro is, like, purposefully attacking the brand and attacking fans and everything they've done, because I've liked stuff they've done. They've absolutely made mistakes. They've made a ton of fumbles right now, especially the last couple years, but they've also done some cool stuff. I definitely miss the consistency of Bandai and having all that product around. You know, it felt like we had much more of a presence. You know, I even thought that they weren't so bad during the Neo Saban time. That's the thing I was talking about when I was saying, like, romanticizing. I think that's, like, not so much for me, because I don't necessarily romanticize Bandai, because I liked both stuff that Bandai and Hasbro did, but I feel a lot of fans romanticize it in the sense that these were the people that were, like, Bandai sucks, they're trash and unpainted, oh my god, bring over the Sentai mech, I hate Bandai. And then, you know, Hasbro bought it, and they're like, oh, Hasbro's our savior, Bandai sucked, and now they're like, Bandai was our hero, Hasbro sucks. So it's like, no matter what, fans are always gonna complain. They're always gonna frame the company as the villain and them as the hero, but they romanticize Bandai even though they trashed it back then, acting like they loved it the whole time, even though they were equally trashing Bandai back then, and they're trashing Hasbro now. It's kind of like how everyone for years was like, I hate Ash Ketchum, I wish he'd leave the show, I wish the most painful death on Ash. And then as soon as he left, though, everyone's like, he was my hero. I guess my point with that is it's kind of easy to look back at, you know, when we had consistent content versus no content and feel like that would have been better and could have been better, and there's potential there. And that's certainly true, but I do find that interesting, is would we be better off with where we're at now, and if Hasbro ever gets it off the ground, or would we have been better off if Saban had kept it and maybe tried again, or if they had been more successful? I think that's really hard to say. Like I said, it's a matter of what you want to see. I think if like the best case scenario took off and the movie did well and we got to still have the show, that would have been appealing, but if somehow the reboot's successful, that would be nice too. I think the most interesting thing I thought about for this video was that, you know, the plans Saban had for basically having both the main show and Sentai adaptations continue and a reboot universe happen is kind of what a lot of fans would like to see now. And I think that's interesting. And the fact that it wasn't able to happen, and I'm curious to see what would have happened in the timeline where Saban had kept it. Would we be on Hulu or Netflix still? Would we still be going? Would they ever attempt again? Or would we just kind of exist as we are now? Again, I do think that the one thing I miss most is Bandai, not in a Hasbro hating way, but I definitely miss that consistency. And, you know, I don't follow a lot of what Bandai makes. I think the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is the Dragon Stars figures, which I buy a few of every now and then, and I think they're actually pretty good for the price. I'm sure there's somewhere out there like, of course they're not good, it's missing this yellow paint here, they hate the fans! But from what I've seen, they're pretty good. So I don't feel like they'd be making terrible products if they still had it. I'd definitely be curious about the volume, like hypothetically if there was still a show happening, or if they were trying to make shows, like figures based off of mmpr or the comics during the lull, would we get a line that was as robust as it used to be? Or would it be like now? Because even when we had like the Dino Fury line and later Beast Morphers, it had like a much smaller presence, but I don't know. But what do you guys think? Who do you think would be the best company to have Power Rangers? Do you think Saban should have kept it, or should have still had it? Disney? Hasbro, give them another chance? Or is there someone else I haven't thought of? Let me know in the comments as always. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell. See notifications for my videos. The Awesome Writer, signing out.